It's Friday night. And greetings, good groovers, Earth people, 14 viewers out there in the darkness. Normally you'd be watching Chiller Theater on WBNS 10 TV, but instead you're getting Conversations with the Owl.
And welcome to episode 2. And as you heard last week, Fritz's origins growing up in the small town of Nakusa, getting into the army and to the entertainment field, and his interests pulling him all the way up to having his own show in Nite Owl Theatre. We are now going to step back a bit and talk a little bit more about his time at Paramount Astoria Studios in New York. Fritz, you and Jamie Farr have a connection, correct?
Oh, yeah. I forgot, when I was in the army, I was in a group that made the television things, and Jamie was in a group that was traveling motion pictures, where they go all over the country and the world, actually, to film stuff for the army, and they'd use in these films. But we would hang out together in the NCO club, and we'd see each other in the halls and at lunch and so forth like that. And it just so happened that Jamie Farr, who was Jamil Farah when I knew him, but he was our local star because he had been in a big major motion picture along with Sidney Poitier and Glenn Ford and Vic Morrow called Blackboard Jungle. He had made that, and then he was a semi-regular on the old Red Skelton hour-long variety show. And then, of course, he got drafted. He was in the Army. So I met him at Army Pictorial Center. We were in at the same time in the same barracks, etc., like that. So spent a lot of time. He was in the message center one day when my first son was born. And the hospital in Columbus called the Army post, and Jamie got the call, and my wife told Jamie that she was my wife and first kid, blah, blah, blah. So Jamie comes up to the art room where we were hanging out because we weren't working on a picture. He says, "Hey, Corporal, you had a kid. Where's my cigar?" And so I got to spend a lot of time with him, but he was on the road a lot. So it wasn't real tight, but we knew each other well enough to have a beer together. And
so Klinger from MASH
told
you that.
Well, see, when he was in the Army, he was looking forward to getting out because there was talk about a major studio doing the life of Jimmy Durante, and they were casting Jamie as Jimmy Durante in this film. But apparently the film never came off. But MASH did come off,
right.
And he went on. He did some bit parts on, I think some of the sitcoms of the day. And then he was a semi-regular on the Red Skelton show. Well, it was before the Army.
Did you guys ever connect after?
He came to Columbus once for something, and we got together at the old Highline. He and I and Haldy and somebody else. I forget who it was, but we got together and traded Army pictorial stories again. And do you remember? And it was always fun.
That's neat.
And Haldy, of course, was John Haldy, who was responsible for buying the film packages that you would show on Nite Owl Theatre, right. Correct? That's awesome.
And the nice thing about Channel 10 and Haldy was a terrifically creative program director and also a movie junkie. And because it was Channel 10, they had a lot of money, so Haldy could always buy the best packages that were available.
What does that mean? What is best packages?
Well, it would be like, the distributor who owned the rights to, say, Warner Brothers Pictures. They'd say, okay, we're going to put together a Burt Reynolds package. We're going to have 8 of Burt Reynolds' best films in this package. But if you want those 8, you've got to buy the package that's got 40 other films in there.
And those could be crap, right?
Well, they could run anywhere from A to Z.
So if you wanted Smokey and the Bandit, you may have to take...
They Saved Hitler's Brain.
Right.
Yeah. But then on the other hand, they would have, like, say, maybe a couple of Betty Grable musicals, or they might have like a couple of John Wayne war pictures, or it was a good rundown of things. But it was sold as the Burt Reynolds package, the Meryl Streep package, the
whatever star.
Each of these films had a certain number of times they could be ran. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you wanted Smokey and the Bandit, but that was a hot title, you may only get to run it 4 times in a year, correct?
Yep, correct.
You could choose when you wanted to run it, but you only got 4 runs?
Correct.
Okay, gotcha.
And then
But no other station in your area could run that movie while you had the rights to it.
so then was it also that were these packages passed around, or was it only Columbus would get this package and then that was it?
They were passed around. The
Well, like, for
salesman
example,
went
if Haldy is choosing let's say a Burt Reynolds package, is it regional? Because in California somewhere, if they have the Burt Reynolds package, exclusivity doesn't matter because it's clear across the country.
No,
so did each region have like a Burt Reynolds package?
I think it was what they considered, regional coverage. That, say, for example, we could have the Burt Reynolds package in Columbus, but they could also have it in Cincinnati.
Right. Because it's by it's non-compete if you're you're watching. Now, one thing I heard about, because I am a film geek, I actually own film prints myself now because I'm ridiculous. But these TV prints were 16 millimeter, and I was told that over the years the stations can edit the way they saw fit. So say Smokey, I keep mentioning Smokey and the Bandit.
I think it's funny that's the movie you go to for.
Yeah, it's a dumb movie. But it's fantastic. I mean, the plot of the movie is what, you're stealing a beer truck?
Yeah.
And you got to get it over state lines? Like, what? If that's the worst thing in your life you got to worry about?
Right.
When you figure how popular car racing is,
Right.
I mean, the special effects and the stunts and the driving and that hadn't been seen since the
Bullet. Steve McQueen was the
McQueen.
Big, that's the big car.
And the one from French Connection.
French Connection.
Oh,
right.
oh,
yes.
yes.
Yeah.
I may still need to see that.
Okay. Anyway, you were talking.
But no, but they would leave it up to the channels to edit their own films.
Correct.
So if there was a pair of breastises, they were gone.
Right.
Now, let's say the Christian network got Smokey and the Bandit first.
Right.
And they chopped out any reference to beer or something or whatever. Did you ever get prints that were so torn up you're just like, well, there was that scene?
No.
What
What happened was we had a lady who was in charge of the film department, Mary Stewart, and Mary would watch the movie, and if she thought it was too cut up, she'd call the distributor and say, look, the print because sometimes we'd be showing a movie on a Thursday, and the same movie from the same distributor was shown, say, Tuesday in Akron, and the person in Akron had gotten it from somebody else, and everybody chopped it up or edited it as they went along, and Mary would get the thing, and if she thought there was too much editing, she'd call the distributor and say, look, the print we got is junk. Send us a new one.
She would pre-screen them.
So she'd pre-screen them, yeah.
That's awesome.
So
God bless her for her job.
Oh, really, yeah. But when you edit film, you always cut out at least two frames.
Two frames, yeah, so it doesn't
at least 2 or 3. Right. And some people that before Channel 10 got the film would cut out for language or cut out for cleavage or cut out for this.
I have a 16 millimeter print of Phantasm, and the only thing cut out is a shot of breast at the very beginning. Everything else is complete, but it's just like jump. Because it was a TV, it had gone to a TV station, so yeah. Well,
Neil Conrad. Neil Conrad was a good friend of mine, and Neil, when I was working radio and my shift was at night, Neil was the night switchboard operator. So when we would have long programs that were scheduled, like Back to the Bible and things like that for some reason would end up in the middle of my music show.
Yeah.
Neil and I get together and we talk, and he went on to become a censor for ABC.
Neil was actually friends with Roseanne Barr.
Oh, yeah.
Roseanne
Barr put him on her show.
Yeah, and he actually was in a post-credits scene, or I say post-credits because Marvel's got me trained, but in the credits scene of Roseanne is him and her at a dining room table, and he's telling her what she can't put in.
Right.
She's testing him. And I asked Neil, I think you had linked me up with Neil, and I went to LA, and I was in his office at ABC, and he was telling me about how, it's the hardest thing is to get these scripts that are hilarious.
Right.
And have to tell people they can't do it.
Right.
I mean,
that was a thing. And of course, in terms of what they could show in the 40s in movies or say on radio in the 40s, got looser in the 50s and looser in the 60s when the hippie generation came on. and even looser and looser and looser as the now over the air stations still bleep like Colbert. They'll
Yeah.
bleep on Colbert and Kimmel and Seth Ryan and
Well, you
some
still
of the
you
other
still
shows.
can't say the 7 dirty words, right?
Right.
Those are still
Carlin was terrific.
yeah.
And it was a thing that there was one time on radio, I accidentally said the S word, but and the mic was on. But fortunately, when I said it, I was turned away from the mic, and I just sort of said it to myself.
What word would that be exactly? No, I'm I'm kidding.
What happened was the studio, the FM studio, overlooked the switchboard. We didn't have a night switchboard operator then. They'd done away with that job. But I could see the lights on the switchboard panel.
Yeah.
And I looked down there, and fortunately, not a light was blinking, so I knew that people hadn't heard it.
Right.
So you've had close calls on radio and TV and things, and I remember, what was it you said you would try to break each other up when you would be doing, like, what, funeral ads and things?
Oh, right, yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it was sort of a thing both in radio and TV. In the days when it was fun to work there, before it got
Corporatized,
yeah, is one of the things you would try to do would be break up the guy on the air on radio and TV. And, there was some beautiful things that people did. Like one time a guy, Flippo, was supposed to be doing a Bosco commercial, and one of the guy production assistants put in a bottle of sour milk. So Flippo pours the glass of milk, throws in the Bosco, stirs it up, takes a slug, and I mean, you can see steam coming out of both ears.
Right, yeah.
But he gets through the commercial.
Right.
As a side note, real quick, we've mentioned Flippo, I think, in the last episode, too. Obviously, our listeners probably know who Flippo the Clown is, but tell us just real quickly about Flippo and who he was and what he hosted on Channel 10.
Flippo had an afternoon show called Flippo's Bandwagon, and an interesting thing, when it first came on the air, Flippo the Clown was owned as he was sort of the Elsie the Cow. What Elsie was to Borden, Flippo the Clown was to this bread company. And this bread company sponsored the first Flippo show, and they cast Flippo as the thing. Well, the bread company stopped sponsoring it, but it kept on going as Flippo the Clown's afternoon show. And somewhere, maybe he's on maybe like a year after the bread company stops, and somebody in the bread company says, hey, wait a minute, that's our copyrighted character. And so they gave a cease and desist order to Channel 10, so Flippo had to go off the air while Channel 10 and the bread company decided, and ultimately Channel 10 bought the character, and then after that, years later, Flippo bought the character.
Oh.
So he was Flippo the Clown, so he had to be dressed up in clown makeup, whereas you just had to put on the glasses.
Put on the
And
glasses.
the two of you were good friends, correct?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So Bob Marvin was his name?
Bob Marvin. And we'd be sitting in the dressing room together, and I'd put the glasses on, and he'd be working with the white makeup and the red nose and
Right.
doing the stuff around the eye. Owl, you got to just open up the goddamn case and take out the glasses and put them on in a split, and I'm sitting here, putting on an hour's worth of makeup and then another hour to take it off. I only wish I had stock in Kleenex because it took so much to get it off.
Right.
But the neat thing about Bob Marvin, Flippo the Clown, was whether he was Flippo the Clown or Bob Marvin, who was also a killer tenor sax player. I mean, it was the same guy. He didn't need the Flippo the Clowns. And when he went to Warner, when he went from Channel 10 to Warner, part of the deal was he would do a Flippo show, but then there would be a Bob Marvin variety show where he could just...
And this was Cube, right?
Cube, that's the term.
This was Cube, based out of
that's what the
Westland Mall.
Yeah, that was what the Warner Video Comics showed on.
Yes, which when you played Hal Jordan.
That's when I played.
Yeah, this is all coming later too, but we're just
when I played Green Lantern, and I did 6 Mystery in Space comics.
Yes,
where I did all the voices except the females.
Excellent.
And so, yeah. But anyway, Flippo was enormously popular, and I got to do his show. Like when he would go on vacation, I got to sub for Flippo a couple of weeks a year. And then
so Fritz the Day Owl happened a couple times, right?
and then Dan Immel and
So for the show, though, for the Flippo show, what did you do when you had to take over for the show?
I would do the same thing. I would do the commercials. I would do the intro.
But as Fritz the Nite Owl?
I would do as Fritz the Nite Owl.
Oh, okay. So it was clear that Fritz was guest hosting and that you didn't
Yeah.
have to put on the makeup for Flippo, right?
You didn't do
no,
a variety show, like a variety hour.
No, it was like, there was, Dan Immel was one of his co-hosts, and he and Dan used to get in these terrific, fun discussions, arguments. And there was another one, Bob something or other, that again, they had a great interaction. And so Dan Immel and
Dan
Bob...
Immel was he the host of Schiller Theater?
He was host of the Nite Owl Theatre before I was doing it.
Okay, yeah. But it was called Schiller Theater?
Armchair Theater.
Armchair Theater. That's
And then Friday night, it was Armchair Theater with Dan Immel Monday through Thursday. Friday night was Double Schiller with no host. Saturday was Saturday Night Movie with no host. Sunday was no host. But Monday through Thursday it was Armchair with Dan.
fantastic. Okay.
Yeah. And then when Nite Owl came on and became popular, it went from being just Saturday night to 7 nights a week.
Yeah. No, that's great. I just want to give a little background on Flippo and everybody for our listeners that may not know who he is. But back to breaking each other up during the ads. So this is where you had mentioned Flippo and we got away from that. But so trying to break each other up on the air.
Well, I think the funniest one we had was Bill Hamilton, who was another announcer, a good friend of mine at WBNS Radio. There was a magazine I subscribed to. It was called The Realist, out of Greenwich Village, that I had learned about when I was in the Army. And they made maybe 48 inches long by maybe 7 inches high, red, white, and blue stars and stripes. It said, "Fuck communism." And it was a thing that I got this thing in the mail. Still have it. You can see it in my living room. We got that, and we were good friends with an announcer over at WTVN, which was just the next. BNS was on East Broad, and WTVN AM at that time was on East Gay, on the 6th floor of the Buckeye Building. So we went over there. We were going to break up our friend who was on WTVN. And again, in those days, the audio booths were all glassed in so that people walking by could look in and see the DJ. So we go by and we wave to our friend. He's doing a thing, and he plays a record, and we're waving to him and so forth. And we're standing there, and he comes out of the record, says who it is, and he starts into a funeral company commercial about in your moments of bereavement and blah, blah, grief. And so we take this fuck communism thing and we hold it up to the glass, and he's in bereavement and all of that. And he sees this sign and he just collapses.
Yeah.
I mean, and the thing was, you could never tell the audience what made you laugh.
Right.
And so that was probably...
That's so mean.
Yeah.
Well, I used to do, when I did theater, I remember the worst part was anytime I had to open up an envelope and read what was on the envelope, because other actors or whatever would write things like down. And I remember during rehearsal, I would open up this thing, and my aunt had died in the play. And I remember I'd open it up, and it was very dirty what somebody had written. And I would start laughing, and the director got very mad because... we were not being professional, whatever. And then one time when I actually opened up the letter and it said, your aunt is dead. And for some reason that made me laugh even louder, harder, because, we're all trying to mess
Right, yeah.
But we're opening up doors and not knowing what you were going to see behind the door.
And Fritz, you always had this. Oh, go ahead.
One of the ones a guy pulled on me was part of my radio show was I had to do a 5-minute local newscast in every hour. And I would do like local news, then I do like national news headlines, then I had to do sports, and then weather. Well, it was a thing that I would go in to the AP machine that had all the headline. I got the headline, national headlines of the local. I called the local police, sheriff, fire department, and so forth, see if there was anything happening in there. And I'd rip off the sports scores, and they would just say Cubs 3, Giants 1. And they would just have it like that way. So I would say Cubs defeated the Giants, blah, blah, blah. But I put a different verb between each score. because I didn't like it where the guy'd say, so-and-so beat so-and-so, so-and-so beat so-and-so, so-and-so beat. So I put in a different, because it was an English major, I could come in with a different verb for each game. Well, our switchboard operator just thought this was terrific. And they made it so that he now had to put the newscast together for me. And I never, he'd bring in the stuff, and I was to the point now you can put anything in front of me and I can read it and announce it, and, good. So he puts the stuff on, I read the local news, national news. I get to the sports, and he's got so-and-so effed so-and-so 3-2. And then S on.
Right.
Each verb was more
Vile,
graphic and disgusting
Rude,
than the one before it. And I mean, I took it in the head and I just absolutely broke up.
That's great.
But I was still able to get through the sports.
Right, no, that's great.
Well, you as a practical joker, I mean, I think you had told me a story one time, and we can actually jump back to it now if you want, because it is Army related. When you were in the Army, did you steal a duck vehicle and take it out on the water?
Oh, that was
this something that...
No, I didn't steal it. It was like when I was in ROTC at Ohio State, I was in what they call Transportation Corps ROTC Advanced my junior year, and they had a duck,
Yeah, explain to us what a duck is. I mean, I haven't
duck
seen
is a
it.
2.5-ton truck that goes out in the water and picks up cargo from a cargo ship. And they had, I think, 2 of them. Well, me and another guy, we would go by and we would check out the duck from the officer in charge of the day, and then we'd take the duck down to the Scioto River and we'd think.
So you could drive it and it could be on water?
And we could go in the water.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So, to make a long story short, this one day, my buddy and I decided, well, we'll just get the duck and we'll pick up our dates. And the old Big Bear store on West Lane Avenue was right across the street from the ROTC building. So we went over to Big Bear, got a couple of 6-packs, headed down to the Scioto. We're doing our stuff in the Scioto, and we come back, and we're dropping the girls off at Big Bear when one of the officers in the ROTC thing is coming out of the building, and he sees this party being broken up at the thing.
On a military vehicle.
On a military, yeah. And that was the end of my career as an advanced, because I would have gone on as a. No, I was in my first quarter. It was fall quarter of my senior year, and at the end of my, spring quarter, I'd been commissioned to second lieutenant and had to serve 2 years active duty, and then I think it was 4 or 6 years in the reserve. Anyway, to make a long story short, that was what caused my exit from advanced ROTC.
Gotcha.
And put me in line to be a draftee, because if you were in ROTC, you had a deferment. They wouldn't draft you while you were taking ROTC on your way to being an officer. So that's what put me in the draft status.
Okay, so once again, the ladies' man gets in the way of himself.
Yeah.
So,
well, it was the thing that I would always schedule. Like each quarter, you would put together a schedule of the classes you wanted, and you'd look in the catalog as to when they were available, what day, what hour. So I'd always schedule ROTC for like 4 in the afternoon. And invariably, they'd give it to me at like 8 in the effing morning.
Right.
Well, I had an apartment on East 11th Avenue, right across from, what's the theater on 11th?
Gateway now.
Right across the street from Gateway on 11th Avenue. So I'd have to walk all the way from that apartment, rain, snow, sleet, slime, what have you, in my uniform, shine shoes, brass polished, all the way to the ROTC building, which was way down on West Lane Avenue, across from where the old Big Bear store was, just a bit east of where the bridge crosses the river.
Yeah, that's a hell of a walk.
Yeah. So I'd get there I'd have to get up at like 6:30 in the morning, get into this uniform, try to get stuff. It was impossible. And I'd get to ROTC, and we'd have to stand inspection, and I mean, they'd just be writing off demerits. Brass is bad, shoes are bad,
right.
tie is loose, just piled up the demerits, and I could never get
Appears like he was jumped on the way here.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. And what they would do is they would take your demerits, and if you had, say, like a 98 average in your classwork, they would subtract your demerits from your
Was one
schools.
demerit like 1%?
Was 1 point.
Okay.
So if you had a 98 in your written work and classwork, and you had 10 demerits, you didn't have a 98, you'd have an 88.
Oh.
And if you had 20 demerits, which is what I was usually logged in, and I had like a 96 or so forth classwork, but you minus 20 or 25
Yeesh.
from 96, you're down to 76, and
It's a C.
yeah,
A C plus.
C. Oh no,
Or
C minus.
C minus. Yeah.
And between the demerits and my adventures in the duck.
But that adventure in the duck needs to be its own comic strip.
Oh,
Just
yeah.
that story.
Yeah. But the thing was, when we went to ROTC summer camp, I was one of the best duck drivers because we had to take a duck out onto the ocean about a mile out to a cargo ship, and they would dump a big load of cargo.
How does one become a good
Duck driver.
what makes a
Practice.
bad duck driver?
Bad duck driver is
question.
if you're not hitting directly into the surf can capsize. If the surf turns you sideways
right.
like a wave going over, it can turn the duck over.
Gotcha.
Perhaps it's just me, but I'm thinking Tim Burton's Batman Returns, the giant duck vehicles. This thing didn't actually look like a quacking duck. Right?
No. It looked like a regular 2.5-ton truck.
Just a second.
Right.
Just a visual for all of you out there.
Yeah, no, it just was
know
a
what I'm
regular
talking
2.5-ton truck that you would drive it on land to where you got to the surf, and then you would switch from wheel drive to propeller drive, and you would push another lever that would seal up the thing. But it
Sounds
wasn't.
like something out of a James Bond movie.
Well, no, actually,
wasn't-
no. If you go to Cape Cod, and
Yeah.
you actually can go on duck tours.
Oh.
And it's very similar.
So they still
but they
have
actually
these,
do look
these
like
things are still.
yeah.
See, next to the driver's seat, and they were not covered. I mean, you had like the windshield,
Right.
then it was all open behind you. They had a huge, essentially exhaust pipe right next to the driver's place, right to the left of it, and it was up, and it was a right-angled curve. And so when they were pumping the water out of it, which while you were driving it, which was all the time that pump was working, that water would be coming out there, and if the wind was wrong, it would be splashing right
driver.
in you as the driver.
No one ever turned this into a bong?
If bongs had been available, then I'm sure somebody would have.
Right.
did it. But for some reason, I just had a knack of, while I was crappy on the sand dunes on land, I was really a killer driving that baby out onto a really major league surf.
That's great.
Nice.
And yeah.
Always got to be good.
Talk
at
about
good
skill,
stuff.
unnecessary skill.
Well, the last episode you talked about the things that you put on your resume. Did you put that on your resume about how you were an expert duck driver?
No.
Or no, that was not.
Well, I
Might
mean,
have helped launch your
that
career.
wasn't going to help me in radio, TV, or advertising.
that was a conversation piece.
But
It's just Fritz the Nite, local guy Fritz the Nite Owl, and he's just waving from a duck in this ad for like military vehicles.
but Dwight D. Eisenhower was a definite plus because
Sure.
it broke the ice.
Right.
So all of this we're at right now goes back to I like these little sides we do. So the censorship, the film prints for TV. Did any film print you showed? Did anything not get edited out? Maybe a risque print snuck through.
There was a
Tell us about that.
All right. We're doing double chiller, and the second chiller started about maybe 2 o'clock in the morning. And the second chiller, for some reason, was delayed in getting to Channel 10, so they didn't have a time to do anything except put in where the breaks were going to be. They didn't have time to pre-screen it. Well, the double chiller in the thing, this lady is asleep in this gloomy castle, very, very dark, and the monster is in there, I forget what it is, but she wakes up, and she gets up out of bed, and she is wearing a see-through negligee. Well, at the time, the only people at the station were the switcher, who switches from the film to the announce booth, and the sound, and so forth, the switcher, the projectionist, and me. And all of a sudden, this lady stands up, and you can see the breasts and the pubic hair and everything like this. I mean, it was underneath a filmy nightgown, but you
Right.
could see it. So we're holy, what do we do? And we're trying to decide. I said, well, we've already shown it. If we stop the thing, what are we going to go to? So we're discussing this, and we didn't have the all-night Channel 10 news then. So I run out of the announce booth into the newsroom, and no phones are ringing. So I figure, oh, okay, nobody's really noticing this. So we just say, screw it, we'll let the film run.
Right.
And that little sequence passes, and that's the end of it. Well, that's Saturday night. Come Monday morning, I get a call at home, and it's John Haldy, and he really sounds mad. Fritz, what happened on Double Chiller on Saturday night? I said, well, we had sort of a place that wasn't quite it. He says, I know it. He said, what did you do about it? And I said, well, we talked about it and decided to let it run. I said, why? He said, well, I had a whole bunch of calls this morning about that. And I said, well, what did they say? And then he broke up and he said, they all wanted to know when we were going to run it again.
Which is funny because when people are so uptight, and I know that when you're on broadcast television, there are rules, just like, airwaves, and I mean, but at the end of the day, does anyone care that they saw? I mean, the thing is, as you said, it's almost like people are calling in saying, show it again.
Right.
It's so amazing to me how the people at the top are always like, we got to censor this, but at the end of the day, people just want to have fun, and if it's on that late, who cares?
In those days, the FCC was infinitely more powerful, I guess, than it is today.
Okay.
And
which is weird because the internet's a thing today. Like, you could be tracked easily, much easier.
But I mean, it was a thing both in radio and TV. I mean, you didn't even, like when I said, you couldn't even say damn or hell.
Right.
Unless you were really talking theologically.
Yeah.
But the FCC, it could pull your license for just about any transgression they felt. For example, Howard Stern got the station he worked for got fined hundreds of thousands of dollars, Major League bread, because Howard was so descriptive and free in what he said. And I think that was one of the reasons he left one of his first. I think it was the reason he left a couple of stations was because, well, in the movie Private Parts, the people at New York NBC had hired him they hired him because
they looked at numbers.
They looked at numbers, and he had completely wiped out all of the other Washington D.C. stations that he and they hired him unheard.
Right.
And they got, he would play those games on words you can't say on television. So they'd say, let's fill in the blank here. Okay, I'll say the word blank, and you put in what you blank willow.
Right.
And then pig vomit, Paul Giamatti.
Right. Yeah.
In his best role.
Oh.
Yeah. So good.
It was
so good.
I had worked for guys in radio and knew people in positions of power in radio that when I saw Paul Giamatti doing that program director for NBC.
You knew that.
You knew guys just like
holy cow, this.
Did you ever run into like a Don Imus kind of guy where like he saw you and was like, you talentless hack, I'm better than. Did you ever have to deal with like somebody's ego?
No.
Okay, because that was the one thing I knew Howard like.
All of the DJs in Columbus that competed against each other were all friends.
Okay.
Right.
Because, I mean, we would do things like the Jimmy Crumb Telethon, and we would do like the food bank shows and so we all would get together. We all knew each other. And so it was a thing that there was no antagonism between me or any of the people I competed with or that they competed. Yeah.
So with your like popularity, were you ever recognized like on the street where like you're grocery shopping and people are coming up to you and
I was not recognized by sight, but I was recognized by sound.
That's the thing. When I first met you,
because were the glasses making you like? Okay, so
really,
is that what it was? Or?
Really,
was there an anonymity to it?
The glasses really made me anonymous when I wasn't wearing the glasses.
Oh wow!
People didn't recognize me until I opened my mouth.
Well, when you and I first met in 2008, I remember Dino Tripodis introducing us at a lunch, and I was like, "That's Fritz." Because I did not know what you looked like. All I knew were the glasses.
Mm-hmm.
And when you spoke, I'm like, "Oh yeah, of course."
Yeah.
But it very much so. But I know. Okay, so you would tell me that when you get off the air, sometimes they're like 4 a.m, sometimes it's late.
Mm-hmm.
But that OSU campus, there would still be parties going on,
Oh yeah,
and that you'd frequent them.
right.
Did you ever show up like a badass wearing the glasses, or did you just go as Fritz Parent?
I just go as me.
That's awesome. I was just like, I didn't know if you like milked that at all.
No, well,
Like, hey, ladies, got the glasses
I
on.
I had been in a fraternity for 2 years, my freshman and sophomore years at Ohio State. I had been in a fraternity, and I knew what those parties were like, and I knew that I wasn't going to go as the owl at 3 a.m.
Right.
to one of those parties. So I just go as myself and
That's cool.
have a good time. And
I remember a few years back, Fritz and I, there was some guy in, I think, Upper Arlington, somewhere around here. And he, well, I mean, far off on the planet Earth.
Right.
He had this like really nice house and everything. And it was like, I compared it to like the Playboy Mansion. And they had asked me, well, you can't, you know where I'm going. So they had asked me like, hey, you're going to see Fritz tonight. We had a show, I think, at the Ohio Theater. And after the show, I was like, what are you doing? Because we've been invited to a party. And Fritz was like, well, I'll probably go home. And I was like, come to this party. Because it was almost like, if I bring you, I'll get points.
Right, sure.
And Fritz put the glasses on, and we walked into this party. And the guy that owned the house was like, oh, my God, Fritz the Nite Owl's in my house. And there were literally like topless ladies out at the
oh yeah,
hot tub. Yeah. And literally, so I'm like at this, I mean, it was like we walked in. I mean, this was Ohio.
Right.
And I've been to LA parties like that, but never in Columbus.
Right.
And this guy was super cool, and he was remodeling his house, but it was a nice house. And I just remember like, where's Fritz? I lost him at one point. And of course he's at the hot tub.
Right.
yeah. That was Old Arlington, as I recall.
Yes, it was Old Arlington.
And
I don't know where. I don't even know the person that owned the house. It was like one of those things where you get invited through hearsay, and it's like, you should show up at this address with Fritz.
Right.
And sure enough.
Person A is invited, and he
Right.
invites person B and C.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then my admission to the party was you.
No. You knew somebody who knew somebody.
I did. I'm not outing them right now, though.
Well, I can't think of who it was, but I do remember.
You know him too.
Oh, okay. I do remember the party.
Right. Yeah.
One of the best ever.
But I remember going to that with you and just going, I wonder if this was how he was back in the day when he'd go to these OSU parties at 4 a.m. And, because the thing is, what's great about you, and especially at your age, is that I get so many comments on our Facebook page that say, like, why do you guys have these things so late at night? Like, I'm an old person. I can't get out that late. And I'm like, Fritz can stay out till 4 a.m. You can too. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, but I think your whole life you've pretty much, when did you transition from like normal person's hours to the ability to stay up so late and be fine with that?
Well, I was
shift,
that,
I guess, is
I was that way all the way through high school because I like to listen to radio, and so I would listen late at night. I've always had trouble early in the morning, and as you know, even now when I have people over, I say it's got to be after 2 in the afternoon.
Yeah, right.
Oh yeah, totally.
So it was being in the Army was difficult because I had to be there at I was in New York, so I had to leave my apartment in Flushing and get all the way to Long Island City to the bay on the subway during rush hour. So it was that was tough, having to do roughly 6 till 5 or 6 work day, and then party in New York because they had all the jazz clubs there and everything like that.
Weren't you in New York when Jack Kerouac was doing beat poetry? I mean, not that you ever saw him, but wasn't it that time where he was like a beat poet?
It was at the 57 through 59, as I recall, poetry and jazz as a club entertainment in a mass pot was a lot of the jazz poets and players were there when I was there. And
how cool that would have been to walk in and Jack Kerouac's on stage.
Well, I never saw Kerouac, but there were a couple of others. Now, I did get to meet Gene Shepard, and I did get to meet major league cartoonist.
Was it the guy Crumb?
Shel Silverstein.
Where the sidewalk ends. Yeah.
Yeah. So I got to meet
And
those.
Gene
two.
Shepard, of course, was Christmas Story, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
The narrator on Christmas Story.
Cleveland.
But he had a weekly Sunday night show that ran from like, I think 11 or 12 at midnight till about 2 in the morning, where it's just Shepard ad lib.
Yeah, you mentioned that. Yeah.
It was a thing that my wife and I, we turn off all the lights in the place. We'd lie in bed and we'd listen to Shepard because, I mean, a lot of the stories that are in A Christmas Story, he told ad lib on the show. And it was just like he was putting cartoons in your head.
Right.
And since my wife and I were both, now Shepard was a couple of years older than me, but we both had been brought up in the morals of the 30s and the 40s and the early 50s. So a lot of our frames of reference were the same. It was like the movie stars were the same, the radio stars were the same, the morals were all pretty much the same. Dating procedure was the same. So there was no, even though he was a couple of years older, the frame of reference was there, and we would just lie in the dark and listen to this guy. And then a lot of the stories that he would ad lib over the air turned up as finished pieces in A Christmas Story.
Right.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So I do have a
But
question.
as a matter of fact, he was one of the influences that helped me maintain the style or contributed to the style that I have on the air.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I do have a question for you. So when I asked you about the anonymity, or if you when you would go to the grocery store and people would recognize you, so you've got how many kids?
5.
So you've got five kids.
sons.
So 5 sons. So when your kids were at school, and you were doing the whole dad thing with the kids in school, did people know like, oh, that's that dad?
Oh yeah.
Is Fritz the Nite Owl, or
It was a bigger deal to their friends than it was to them, to be quite frank.
no, sure,
Did
yeah.
Your kids get hassled for it, or were they
No,
high-fived for
It
it?
was a big deal for them,
That's awesome.
And as a matter of fact, my granddaughters, and even great-grandchildren, when they hear the last name, they ask about, are you in any relation to, and yeah, he's my grandfather, he's my great-grandfather. And
Right.
It was like a big deal for the teacher who would listen to me as a kid
Right,
or
sure.
as a teenager. So no, it's always been a plus.
Because with your kids, it's like you're just dad.
Yeah.
But to the friends and to
But I mean, like
neighbors,
a lot of the people that are on like Colbert and Kimmel and Seth Ryan and talk shows like that, a lot of them will say, my kids' friends, it's a bigger deal to them
Right.
that I'm Matt Dillon on Gunsmoke than it is to my own kids who, that's dad and he does.
Right.
Which is so funny to me because I think entertainers and their sons, like I forget, it was Fallon or one of them was talking to their child about things, and their kid finds like this band's great, or this actor's great, and then like, oh, that's just dad. But if they love movies and they're seeing these actors they love, how can they not look at dad's work and go, you're the same? Oh wow, you're a big deal, but they don't because it's dad. But it always fascinated me that they can't like.
Yeah,
You know,
right,
you know.
right, right.
It's very not unusual at all for an actor to say, I'm in this movie and I won't let my kids come see it because it's too violent.
Well,
or-
that yeah.
Right.
No, but I mean, that is a fairly regular thing. Like the host will say, Colbert will say, well, or Kimmel will say, are you going to let your children see this movie? And the guy will say, well, this one's a little bit too violent or too sexy and they're not
Right,
quite ready
right.
for that.
Yeah.
I was at a thing recently in LA where Quentin Tarantino spoke. It was like a kind of a small thing, and he's a dad now. He's a dad of 2, and he was asked like, with your movies being so controversial, like, would you show your kids your movies, and at what age, and what movie would you show them? And he thought about it, and he said, I'd have to say that I'd show him Kill Bill, because it's the most like cartoonish, it's like kung fu kind of, and he's like that's where I'd start him, I think, as a dad.
What age?
But he that's the thing. I think he said 12-ish, maybe when they get 12. But he's like, it just, because as a kid, you grew up I grew up on horror. At 7, I saw Elm Street 2. I think might have been my first horror movie. But it was like the WAB TV43 version out of Cleveland, even though I grew up in Columbus. But we would get that channel, and it was always edited for television.
Yeah.
And it was Freddy Krueger was like what I became obsessed with at like 7 or 8 years old. I don't think that's a knock on my parents though, because they one of the first questions I asked them was, how did they do that? How did they do that makeup? And that's when they knew I'd be okay. Where I wasn't like, oh my God, he's killing people.
Because you knew that it was...
Yeah, I knew it was fake. I knew it was like, this is something they made for us to see. Like a production. And that's when they knew I'd be okay.
Oh, well, when I was growing up, and all the way through the 50s, they never showed gore on TV like Psycho. You never saw that knife hitting her flesh.
No.
Right.
And it was a thing like if somebody...
You heard it, though, right? You
heard it. But if somebody like went to the army to get a shot and they were going to put the needle in his arm, they'd show the guy with the squirting the two things up, and then they'd cut away to a clock or a reaction. You never saw the needle going in the flesh.
Thankfully, to this day, people could get ripped apart. I'm fine with it. But Halloween 2, there's this shot where it shows the needle going in Jamie Lee Curtis's arm, and I can't do it.
At age 88, and having had millions of shots, because when you're in the army, they're giving you a shot for something.
Do you watch them, though?
I can't watch them put the needle on my arm.
No.
So if you're talking to me and they do it, because 9 times out of 10, it's worse in here than it is, in real. And when they tell me, oh, I'm done, I'm like, oh, awesome. But I'm a baby for the hour before that. Leading up to that, I'm just like,
so I have to give blood every 6 months. And I have to lay down, look away. I've got a banana, right next to me, just,
for sugar.
Right.
Yeah. No, I'm the same. I got the monkeypox vaccine last year or whatever before I went to like Florida and stuff. And they give it to you in your forearm. And I remember I was like, I'll be fine. It wasn't the shot that did it. It's afterward I kept thinking about it and where they did it. And I started getting hot.
Sure.
The next thing I know, 2 firemen had me in front of a fan with a bottle of water. I'm like, I feel like a moron.
Right.
Well,
but you guys are the tough ones because you had to.
I'm very lucky. A, I've got good veins. And B, I've always had people who had a very gentle touch, but I could never look at it. And that would make me a little bit lightheaded if I would see the needle going in. So I never look. But I mean, in my day, growing up, if somebody got sick and threw up like in the classroom or in the John where you were going, I mean, I was like one f-stop of joining them.
Yeah.
I mean,
so that would make you sick. Seeing someone get sick, yeah.
And it really, even in movies now.
Stand by me effect.
It bothers the hell out of me is that they always, so many movies now go out of their way to show somebody throwing up.
So
I have to look away when that happens.
So that's good to know.
So I had to volunteer my kid in the cafeteria when my kids were in school, and some kid I was in. It was hot dog day, and so I was helping like the kindergartners with the ketchup and the mustard.
Yeah.
And I was there, and some kid got sick. He was like a first grader who threw up in the cafeteria, and I was pushing kids out of the way to get out of that room because it was grossing me out so mumuch.
Oh yeah.
And I'm supposed to be the adult, and I'm literally, yeah.
No, I'm not comfortable being human most of the time. I mean, we do some weird things.
No, but I mean, I grew up in a day when like measles, mumps, whooping cough were common, and you got shots from them. But if you got measles, mumps, whooping cough, the doctor would come to your house. They would tack a sign to your front door that said quarantine, which meant that nobody could come to your house, and your mother, your parents and the sick kid were there, and the other kids had to move out of the house with somebody else while that quarantine sign was up. And as I say, it's a thing like people are going out of their minds now about, they're going to make me take the shot. When we were in the Army, it wasn't a question of, do you want the shot? It was like, you show up at 8 o'clock in the pharmacy, you're going to get to confess a sin. Confess a sin.
You're hearing this, America.
Army. Well, Army Victoria was a terrific base because all of the GIs were all draftees, non-military people dealing with these very book-type military people. Well, it used to be like if we weren't working on a film, which was a lot of times, we would go up to the art department place and just sit around and BS and play telephone quiz. But we would first go down to the dispensary, got a cough, and the doctor would say, well, do you want the brown cough medicine or would you rather have the terpen hydrate of codeine, which will give us the terpen hydrate? So they'd give us a little bottle of the terpenhydrate of codeine.
This shit's
Was
no
that-
joke.
Yeah, and we would go upstairs in the art department and sit around and sip our terpenhydrate, get a nice little buzz on, and then play telephone quiz with the people in New York. And
So codeine, that's like the real. See, I can't remember. I was born in 1980, so I can't remember if when I had the cough syrup, if it was the same kind of strong. Because I know you had mentioned to me that even nowadays, if you want the NyQuil that had the like real,
Good
stuff, you have
decongestant,
to go up and like sign a waiver and all this stuff.
yeah, they found out that the regular, apparently it was the decongestant that worked great on me when I had, because it was always like the breathing I had trouble with the
Yeah.
nose and so forth. And the original NyQuil and the CVS version of NyQuil and the Walgreens version of NyQuil all had the same, it was the same stuff. The price was just cheaper to get the
Right.
store. So that always just cleared up the sinuses. Well, anyway, I had bad sinus trouble breathing, and I went and I bought a bottle of NyQuil off the shelf and paid for it, and I took it home and took a slug. And normally in 15 minutes, the sinuses were clear. Well, nothing happened. So I tried it again a little bit later on, and it didn't work. So I went back to the drugstore the next day to say, this stuff doesn't work. Give me another brand. And the guy explained to me that the old brand I'd been getting, there was something in it that apparently the teenagers found out that they could make something illegal.
It was like a
Yeah.
bomb or something they were making.
Well,
It
when
some
I was
kinda
in college, I remember guys would have Robitussin parties.
Yeah. Oh.
And so I remember you'd buy like a 6-pack of, if you could, something like that, and people would be drinking like Robitussin, and because there was something in it back when I was in college where,
Well, that's probably about
Well,
the time that I was having. Anyway, so to make a long story short, the guy explained to me that they had changed the formula for the off the shelf stuff to where the original was still available through the pharmacy, up to 2 bottles a year, and
wow.
you had to sign for it.
Gotcha.
And if you went to pharmacy A and signed for it, and then went to pharmacy B and tried to sign for it, the guy at B knew you had. But what happened was, like right now, CVS and Kroger are 2 of the places that no longer make the generic version of what used to be on the shelf. Walgreens still does,
Yeah.
and it was just, for me, it was a terrific flu
Right.
and decongestant clearing up. So I'd always get my 2 bottles a year. I've got 1 bottle in there. It's got to be about 3 years old. That's never been opened.
Not after this podcast, you won't. I'm just kidding.
It's never been opened. But no,
Well, so interestingly enough,
terpenhydrate in the Army was at Army Pictorial was very popular.
so I feel the need to mention this now, even though we're skipping ahead a bit, probably, or this is how we do this. You're a fly on the wall, and you're with us in our conversations. But because we're on the subject, there was a time I believe that because Nite Owl was live 5 days a week, and you pre-taped 2 days, correct? One time on this pre-tape, it was airing, and you had gone home, and we're talking about enhancements.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a time where you were flipping through channels, a little enhanced, and saw yourself? You know where
yeah.
I'm going with this?
Yeah.
Tell us this story while we're on this subject.
Well, a friend of mine, good friend of mine, longtime college friend of mine, grew his own.
Yes.
So
Enhancements.
I was over there one night, and we were just chatting, having a beer, blah blah blah, and taking a puff or two. Well, we were watching this movie, and by the time the movie was over, I was pretty much orbiting Zontar, and I came on the screen, and I'm watching myself, and I said to my friend, I said, and I wasn't putting him on. I said, I really like that guy. There's something, I like the way, and then I was like, Jesus, that's me. That was.
So we brought up Zontar like a few times. Where did Zontar come from?
I mean, it's a long trip for Vidas and I to get here every week.
Oh no,
Yeah.
it was just a thing that when I was doing the jazz show on radio, I just want to BS about this, that, or the other, and somehow this word just came out of nowhere. And Steve Allen used to do a thing about how certain people asked him, why do you always use the name Sam Needleman? He said, because Sam Needleman is phonetically funny.
Right.
And he said there are words that are just what it is or what it means is not funny, but just the sound of them is funny. And it's Sam Needleman. So that was Zontar. You
So
know?
Zontar sounds so alien, like another planet.
I think Green Planet when I think Zontar.
Sure, but I don't know if that was like a reference. Like there was something.
Is it
from,
a comic reference?
From
It just came out. Now, part of it was like the old Edgar Rice Burroughs, John Carter Mars series.
right.
And I was always interested in science fiction. I used to buy when I was in 7th and 8th grade and 6th grade, I would buy like the pulp magazines, the Planet stories, the Fantastic World stories, Amazing stories.
Sure.
That's when Ray Bradbury was writing for 2 cents a word.
Yeah.
And Harlan Ellison was writing fan letters to Harlan and I knew Harlan vaguely because he was a little bit older than me, and he knew he and my older brother were fairly good compadres.
Oh,
so I met
okay.
him through my older brother. I never knew him, never had a one-on-one conversation.
That's a city on the edge of forever, Harlan Ellison.
That
right?
was always in 3 or 4 people around a coffee table in the old North High Street,
Right.
Ohio Union. Great coffee shop.
Okay.
And many things, but I was those John Carter series of Mars books and other planetary things, Buck Rogers, Flash Gordon, all were big favorites of mine. And one called Star Pirate, drawn by Murphy Anderson. And I thought Anderson was just incredible.
Right.
Now, this is in the 40s, but Star Pirate was in Planet Comics, which was a Fiction House publication. And, they had a whole bunch of... it was like an anthology magazine, and Star Pirate was one of my favorites. But it was, in my day, Superman versus the original Captain Marvel was always a big fight as to who was better, bigger, stronger, blah, blah, blah. And I used to bring up the point that the whole concept of Superman getting his superpowers were because he was from another planet where the gravity was heavier. John Carter had done this in the 20s. And that's where Siegel and Schuster got the idea that being on a planet with heavier gravity would be able to leap tall buildings with a single bound
sure,
and
right.
have more body mass. And of course, one of the things that people don't know is that the original Fawcett Captain Marvel, The Adventures of Captain Marvel, outsold every other comic book published. Donald Duck, Bugs Bunny, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman. The Captain Marvel, Adventures of Captain Marvel by Fawcett Publications, for about 3 years, was the top-selling, most popular superhero comic book going. And that's when, early on, DC started a lawsuit that it was plagiarism. And Fawcett's point was, look, Superman comes from another planet. Batman has to exercise. Billy Batson just says a magic word.
Shazam.
That's almost like a variation of Aladdin and the genie out of the bottle. Instead of rubbing the bottle, the genie comes out. Billy Batson says the word, and he turns into an adult version of himself. But anyway, we would have that argument. And ultimately, DC comic books faded. Fawcett gave up the rights to Captain Marvel. 10, 15 years later, DC purchased the character, and it has evolved into Shazam,
Right.
which is not Captain Marvel, but really should be called Billy Batson Super Teen, because he doesn't turn in, like in the movie Shazam, one of the powers is wisdom of Solomon, courage of Achilles, and yet in the movie Shazam, he spends half his time saying ouch and running away, and he doesn't understand that he's an adult version of himself.
Right.
So...
And one of the amazing things is that all this talk of comics and Fritz's knowledge on this and Vidas' knowledge of this will come into play in episode 3. But thank you for listening to episode 2. In the next episode, we're going to get to how Fritz became a part of comic books and much more. So thank you for listening to Conversations with the Owl. Join us every Friday night at 9 p.m. and check out our Square store at wntlchannelz.square.site. That's wntlchannelz for Zontar.square.site. And you can check out my website at MikeMcGranermusic.com. Thank you so much, and we'll see you, or you'll be listening to us next week at 9 p.m. Thank you so much.